Hello and welcome to the MBYogi podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBYogi is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBYogi, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the MBYogi podcast. I am so excited that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. And I just wanted to kick this episode of the podcast off by just wishing you well. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are safe and healthy and comfortable. And I hope that things are going as best as they can considering the current situation. Today on the podcast, I am very excited to be joined by Emily Sussell. Emily is the founder of Private Yoga Brooklyn, and she's also the founder of the Abundant Yogi. She has been somebody that I've been connected with for a while, and she has such an amazing business. She has an awesome private Facebook community. And one of the things that I really love about Emily is that she is supporting yoga teachers in creating successful and abundant private yoga businesses. So on this episode of the podcast, we talk about her yoga story, how she first got into yoga, what inspired her to become a yoga teacher, what it was about privates that really drew her in, and then how she was able to evolve that into a full-time income, a business that supported her to live on her own in Brooklyn. We also talk about how she's been able to shift almost everything that she does online, what her online business is, tips for creating an online business. And then we also talk a little bit about teaching privates online. So if you are listening in real time during the global pandemic and you are taking your private business online, this might be something that's helpful for you. So I hope that you enjoy this episode of the podcast with Emily. And before we get to that, just a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by OfferingTree. If you're looking to get your yoga classes online in a hurry, I recommend checking out OfferingTree. They make it easy to schedule and take payments for online classes with Zoom, Skype, YouTube, and other video conferencing tools. OfferingTree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one account, you can create a website in minutes with email marketing tools to collect email addresses, allowing you to send newsletters and automated emails to your subscribers. It all works seamlessly together with one account and one subscription. Forget spending all your time and energy just trying to remember what each account does and what your login information is. On top of that, OfferingTree has an embedded scheduling feature, so if you already have a website that you love, you can use it for online payments and scheduling. To learn more about what OfferingTree can do for your digital presence, visit offeringtree.com/MBYogi. OfferingTree has been supporting MBYogi for over a year now, and I not only love the product, but I also love the people. OfferingTree is providing special pricing for MBYogi listeners, so be sure to visit offeringtree.com/MBYogi. That's offeringtree.com/MBYogi to receive the discount. All right, now on to the episode. Welcome to the podcast today, Emily. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Thanks, Amanda. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation and just to see where we take things today. And my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about your yoga story and how you first got into yoga?
Absolutely, yeah. So my yoga story starts when I was about 16 years old. So I was an early bloomer with yoga, and I was a teenager, and I wanted to get in shape. I wanted to get fit, and I actually remember the day I was like having a conversation with my mom about like, Mom, like honestly, I think I wanted to lose weight, and she said like, why don't you try yoga? And my mom is a baby boomer, and she was a hippie in the 60s, and yoga was something very different back then. But she did a lot of yoga back then, and she was like, "Oh, I loved yoga when I was young. Why don't you try it?" And I went to my first class as a 16-year-old, and I still remember it. And it was at our local gym. And then I guess it was like that summer, I got really into Bikram yoga. I got really into hot yoga. I was like 17 and I was really into that like aggressive like yoga challenge, go every single day. And that's when it became started to become more of a lifestyle. And that's when I started to understand the deeper meaning and the deeper benefits beyond the physical. And I have memories of like floating out of Bikram yoga on Montague Street in Brooklyn Heights in Brooklyn, where I grew up, and where I still live. And and then I went to college, and I kind of like fell into a crowd of people who were all doing a lot of yoga, and that was so much fun. And my one of my best friends in college was my yoga teacher. She directed me to Yoga to the People. I did my teacher training there in the East Village of New York, basically right after I graduated college. And pretty much gave up any plans to have a conventional full-time career. I was going to be a speech therapist, and I decided to give that up and pursue being a yoga teacher.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that story. And I'm curious, like going through college for speech therapy and then finding like doing this yoga teacher training, like what was it about yoga where you were like, this is what I want to do as my career versus this thing I've been studying?
Yeah, I love that question. So what I remember is that I I enjoyed my yoga classes more than I enjoyed my speech therapy classes. And I just enjoyed like being in my body and being on the mat, and I loved the classes I was taking with my friend and teacher. Her name is Lana Heinches, and she's an amazing teacher. She inspired me because I saw her doing it, and I I just adored her. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what if I pursue a career based on like seeing other people enjoying what they do and loving what they do and making it work versus like the more conventional follow this career path because it'll you'll have good benefits and you'll never be out of a job. And it definitely felt like a risk at the time, but it was a risk that excited me, and I wanted to pursue my passion.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's always really, really awesome to hear. And I think that it's also really cool that you were able to discover that so early. Like, I think, people obviously come to all different types of passions at all ages, but particularly with yoga, people come to it at all different points in life. And I love that you were able to enter this career like right out of college. And I'm curious, like, what your career looked like at that point. Like, when you first started teaching, what were you doing and what did that look like for you?
That is such a great question. So it it did not look very impressive at first. Of course, it definitely was a rough start. And let's see. So I did teacher training in 2012. I finished in 2013 in the spring, and I was in my early 20s, and I finished that up. I was living with my parents, which was such a blessing and a real factor that like that made so much of what I've been able to accomplish possible, because I did have that support, and I'm so grateful for that. And I realize it's a privilege that not everyone has at that age. And so in the beginning, let's say I started picking up I was teaching the kids a lot at the time, actually, because I didn't even really have the confidence to start teaching adults after a 200-hour training. So I started teaching kids, and that was something I was way more comfortable with at the time, because I had always been a nanny, and I had worked in preschools, and so I taught kids. And I slowly started picking up subbing classes for adults here and there. and eventually picked up, my first couple of scheduled group yoga classes. And I did things that way for a little while, piecing things together, piecing together hours here and there, teaching kids and subbing and teaching adults. And what I found was that it wasn't adding up to enough of an income that I could move out of my parents. And I was getting into my mid-20s, and I was starting to feel like stuck. I was starting to feel like, wow, this isn't working. And I was starting to see that I needed to find a better way to make it work.
Right. And I think that this is something that a lot of yoga teachers encounter. And I think that it's one of the things that I'm definitely really passionate about. And I think that you are too in your business now, is helping yoga teachers understand that there are ways to make money and be sustainable. Because I think that for a lot of us, we leave teacher training and we just start teaching as much as we can, and we start discovering what we really love. And I think that one of the quick things that we find is that it's really hard to pay the bills, especially if you live, in a city, like living somewhere like Brooklyn or living somewhere like where I live. It's like, you need a bunch of money just for your basic expenses. And if you're only getting paid like 35 to, maybe $50 per class, it feels really, really complicated to make it work full time.
Absolutely, yeah, and it really was. And I remember at that time, I was just so determined to make it to. I was trying to make $500 a week. I wanted to make $2,000 a month. And I like even that at the time with the approach I was using with trying to piece together group classes, and I was working part-time teaching yoga to kids in a school. And like I remember when I did reach that point and I made it to like a consistent $500 a week and $2,000 a month, and it felt like a heroic feat. And it still wasn't enough at all to be able to move out of my parents and afford like a comfortable living situation in Brooklyn. And I wanted to stay close to family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's like, I feel like we shouldn't have to live in a world where we pick between like our careers or the place that we want to live. Like it should be that we can create sustainable careers anywhere in the world that we want to live. And of course, there's going to be cities that are going to be more expensive than others. And, New York is up there as one of them. But I think that it should certainly be doable. And I'm curious to know like because obviously you're there now in this place where you've created a sustainable business. Like I'm curious what that next step was to get towards having a sustainable business.
Totally, yeah. And I will share that for anyone listening who's in that struggle and is like wondering if it's even possible to overcome. Not only have I now created a sustainable business, but I have created a business that is like so far beyond what I once dreamed possible for myself that every day I'm like in awe that I figured it out. And I'm just like so grateful for all of the mentors and coaches that I've worked with that have helped me get there, but also just for the fact that I've done it at all. And so like next steps, you're asking like what happened next is that so at that point I basically looked around and did my research and talked to teachers who were kind of ahead of the game in the business part than me. And I started hearing people say things like, well, either you get private clients or you get corporate clients, and like that's how you make money as a yoga teacher. And I heard people say retreats. I said, or you could try to run successful retreats. And retreats didn't really resonate with me at the time. And corporate, I had no connection to whatsoever. I had never had a corporate job. I really didn't even know that many people who had corporate jobs. I was young, and most of my friends worked in the nonprofit world, or in education. And so that left me with private. And when I thought to myself, like, could I make a business out of focusing more on private lessons in this area where I live? And it really felt like yes. It felt like yes. I had made businesses out of babysitting, like as a private babysitter for families, like as a teenager. And so in a way, I was like already familiar with the concept of like setting my own rates and finding my own clients and doing business like in homes around the neighborhood where I grew up. And it is an affluent neighborhood, and so I saw that opportunity. I knew that it is something that people in the area would be willing to pay for if I could communicate the value of it in the way I marketed it. And I will say I had tons of doubts about it. I had tons of fears about it. I was very anxious that it would not work. And there were certain people that came into my life around that time that I'm so grateful. They guided me in the direction of believing in myself, believing that I could accomplish it. And then over the next year or two, I put all of my focus on private clients, and I started phasing out group classes, and I built to a completely full practice of private clients, and it changed everything.
Yeah, that's amazing and so inspiring to hear. And I'm curious for anyone who's listening who's like, "Oh my gosh, okay, that's, the thing for me too." How do you go about shifting into creating a private yoga business?
Totally. Yeah. Well, I often say that like the most important step in the beginning was really just deciding. It was like really deciding that that's what I was going to do and really committing to it. And at the time I just, I was practicing a lot of yoga, I was practicing a lot of meditation, and with that came a lot of self-awareness. And I started just being aware of my tendency to not really commit to projects, not really commit to accomplishing something. And I was seeing how that was holding me back. And I was seeing how that was creating barriers to me accomplishing what I wanted to do. And I realized like, okay, if I'm going to get there, if I'm trying to get to like 10 regular clients a week who pay upwards of $100 a session, and I want them to be committed, then I'm going to have to really commit to this vision and not give up, no matter how challenging it feels at times, and no matter how many rejections I get, how many no's I get. I had to commit. And so I'm sure there's lots of like more marketing focused answers to your question if you're interested in hearing that too. But I would say that was honestly the most important thing, was like the internal decision and commitment.
Yeah, I love that because I think that it is really important when you're going to, go out and do something is recognizing that like, hey, this might get hard. And, there's probably going to be times where I'm like, at the end of the day, like, I don't know why I'm doing this, or maybe I should just give up. And so I think that that internal commitment that you made to yourself is such an important, lesson and tip for people to know. I would love to hear some of the marketing stuff if you're down to share that.
Absolutely, yeah. I live for talking about marketing these days, and I know you're
Awesome.
big on that too,
Yeah.
which I love. Yeah, no, because really, like something that I've found in this journey, and that I share with teachers a lot of the time, and it might sound a little wacky to some out there who haven't started thinking this way, but I say like, if you want to be successful as a yoga teacher, you're going to need to fall in love with marketing as much as you love yoga. And like, I think, I know there are people who are like, that's ridiculous, like marketing and yoga are so different from each other, but I've actually learned that they're not. And so like number one for me was like fall in love with it, like make friends with it, stop having an unhealthy relationship to marketing, and like embrace it as a beautiful vehicle for getting my work out there, sharing my message with others, being of service to others, and so nitty gritty. If you want the nitty gritty, like one of the first things I did to set up my private practice was I created a website, and I really made the website like not your generic yoga teacher's website, not like emilysussell.com and there's a group class schedule and a page about workshops and a page about retreats. Like I saw people doing it that way. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, if what I really want is private clients, if that's really what I'm trying to manifest, if that's really what I'm trying to create in my life, then shouldn't I make a website that is like screaming, this is about private yoga? And I remember like having that idea, and I ran home and I got on the computer and I just looked up the domain Private Yoga Brooklyn to see if anybody had it. And nobody had it. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, why doesn't anyone have this domain? Like, why doesn't some yoga teacher who's 10 years ahead of me and like way more experience and like wants to do what I want to do with private clients, like why hasn't she gotten it first? And I was living with a man at the time who was we're not together anymore, but he's very dear to me. And I said to him, I was like, okay, it's available. Like, should I buy that? And he was like, yeah, grab it. And I was like, but like, shouldn't some like better yoga teacher get that? Shouldn't somebody who's been teaching for 10 more years get that? And he's like, he's not in the yoga world. He had a lot of marketing experience and a lot of like entrepreneurship experience. And he was like, Emily, get that domain right now and own it and like set up the website. And if what you want to do is one-on-one yoga sessions, then like that's your domain. Get it and set up your business. And I took his advice, even though it was uncomfortable and scary. And I worked with a really great web designer whose name is Stephanie Cowan. She's fantastic. And I said to Stephanie, like, let's build a site that is like, that says this is a service, like a service of in-home private yoga lessons for busy Brooklynites. And that's what we did.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. And I love that you got that encouragement. Like, just get the domain. Like, what's the worst thing that happens if you get the domain, right?
Totally. It was like $10.
Yeah. And I think also something too that stands out to me is this like imposter syndrome of like, why doesn't somebody else own this? Maybe a better, more experienced yoga teacher should have this. And I think it's a reminder to yoga teachers who are at any stage in their career, but particularly ones that are new into their career, like, if you have an idea, like your idea is valuable and you should roll with that, even if you don't necessarily have like all the experience you need in that moment, like everything will fall into place.
Yeah, absolutely. I was yeah, it was a huge imposter syndrome moment, and I had to realize that there was no harm in getting that domain and setting up that website, and that I was going to continue to develop as a teacher and continue to study. And now it's been several years, and I'm so glad I have that website set up. And so absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you set up your website and then, were you starting to get clients right away or what did that look like for you?
Right. Yeah. Well, no, not right away. And I definitely don't want anyone to think that like just a website is enough to attract leads for private clients, because it's definitely not the only thing I did. But the website, like over time, and like doing some SEO work on it, which is search engine optimization. And yeah, over time, I did start capturing like inquiries through the website, and I think probably a lot more than most generic yoga teacher websites do, because I was so focused on that site about like what it was. It was like so clear, like this is a service that provides in-home private lessons. And so probably like a few months later, I did start generating a lot of nice inquiries through the website. I also did things like I listed myself on Google Business, and I listed myself on Yelp, and I posted a lot on social media, and I just made it really loud and clear that that was the space I was stepping into, that I was becoming someone who is specializing in private instruction. And I made myself visible. The other thing I'll say is that like I learned along the way that lead generation, like getting people interested, is only step one, and that I needed to have a system and like have a process of how to take somebody from being like an interested person to being the actual client. And so I developed a system, and it's so simple, and it's how a lot of businesses run. And these days I call it the private client sign up system, and it's something that I teach to other teachers. And it's basically once you've got an inquiry, to do a call with that person, and at the end of that call to schedule an introductory session, and at the end of that introductory session to book a package. And once I had a system, it was like so freeing. They say like there's that interesting relationship between boundaries and freedom, or structure and freedom. And that really changed everything for me. I was like, oh, I have a system now, and I just have to stay focused on the system. And as long as I do, I'll get results. I'll get clients.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure too, like on the admin side of things, it's one of those things where it takes like more time to set up in the beginning, but then, it gives you a lot more opportunity to take on more clients and interact more freely with your like current clients and stuff like that, because you're not continuously just trying to manage leads, and leads aren't like slipping through the cracks, and there aren't missed opportunities and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And so your business started to go, pretty well, it sounds like at that point. And then at what point did you decide to shift your business online?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So yeah, so that system started working really well for me, and I was just really committed to building out the privates, and I reached a point where I reached my goal, and I was at like 10 private clients a week. I was traveling to their homes, just in Brooklyn. I got to a point where, like, if anyone's in New York listening, like, it was actually a huge accomplishment that I stopped traveling into Manhattan. And I don't know if there's like a similar thing for you, Amanda, with the city that you're from, but like I got to a point where like I wasn't even getting on the subway, and I was able to build the clientele with just within like with a few like sometimes I was getting on the subway, but like even walking distance, I had plenty of clients that were walking distance. And I loved it, and I did it for a little while, and it was very meaningful, and I loved all the clients I was working with. But they say like some of my business coaches, they talk about like no matter how successful we get, like we're always going to be running into the new problems. And that's something that I realized too, is like it's not like we reach our goals and then we have no more problems. We reach our goals and then we have new problems, and they're like new wonderful teachers and obstacles to get to know. And what that looked like for me at that point was, I was like, okay, so I've tripled my income. I've come up with a great business model that I love. I love all my clients, but there was still room for improvement. And what that meant for me was that I didn't like the amount of commuting I was still doing. And I didn't like the amount of time that I was spending traveling in between my clients, and that time didn't feel leveraged. Like I didn't feel like I was using that time as value, like with a sort of like with the amount of value I could get out of it. I found myself kind of like killing time in between clients, or and it wasn't fun, like in bad weather. If it was a rainy day and I had to walk in the rain a lot, or a snowy day and I had to decide between like making money that day or just canceling altogether. And at the same time, I was wanting to travel more, and I was dreaming into like the further future and thinking like, well, wouldn't it be great to be more online and to develop a business model where I don't have to be tied down to New York, and I can travel more and work from anywhere. And I was seeing people like you're one of them, who have more of the digital nomad lifestyle. And at the same time, I was seeing that there were so many yoga teachers I could help build a better business for themselves with the private business, the private yoga business model. And that's when I started to transition to doing more online mentorship and business coaching for teachers. And I started building out my own online business.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love hearing that. And yeah, there's something that is really freeing about being able to work from anywhere. It just gives you this sense of like, oh, I could continue running my business from, New York or Panama or Asia. I could go anywhere at this point. I think that there's something that's just like really wonderful about that. And obviously there's downsides to that lifestyle too, especially around community. And, it's really nice to be with your students and that sort of thing, but it does give you like a big sense of freedom.
Yeah, yeah. The funny thing about it for me is like I kind of just reached the point just a few months ago where like 90% of my business is now online, and about 90% of my income is made electronically. And I do still teach some yoga students, some of the same private clients that I've had for a while. I see them in the evenings. Right now it's over Zoom because everything's online at the moment with this unfortunate health crisis of coronavirus. But what I was going to say, what's interesting about that for me is like right as I reached the point where I'm like I could go anywhere, this virus hit, and it's like I'm not going anywhere, and I've just been entirely in my apartment on my laptop, and not in California, not in Panama,
Yeah,
not in Japan. No,
definitely not in Asia.
no.
Yeah, no, I totally feel you. It's unfortunate timing, but assuming, this will obviously pass and then hopefully you'll be able to go out and travel if that's something that you are looking for. This episode is brought to you by BeYogi. If you are in yoga teacher training, a full-time teacher, or a part-time teacher, BeYogi has the best rated yoga liability insurance to keep you covered in the event an injury happens. Plus, they cover live streaming sessions between you and your students, which is very helpful as all of our business needs change over the next few weeks. Go to beyogi.com/mbiome to get an exclusive $20 discount. That's beyogi.com/mbiome. And if you're not in the market for yoga insurance, they publish 2 articles per week about the business of yoga. I'm on their newsletter because of how great the content is, so I definitely recommend you subscribe. If you're a yoga teacher who is uninsured or considering switching providers, I 100% recommend BeYogi. Again, to get the exclusive $20 off MBOM discount, go to beyogi.com/mbiome. Now back to the episode. But I think, it would be awesome to hear a little bit about, how you've been able to build this online business and any tips you have for people. And particularly because we're in this like current crisis that we're in and a lot of people are having to work online, but also just because I think that more and more, people are looking, having the same thoughts that you had before you pivoted, where it's like, hey, I'm commuting a bunch a day and, I have to leave my house when it's yucky outside because if I don't make money and all that type of thing. So I'd love to hear like what it was like for you to build your business online or pivot to
Yeah,
your online business.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I wanted to create. I started getting clear, I was seeing like there's a lot of yoga teachers who mentor other teachers. A lot of it is mostly geared toward like the teaching itself. And then I did see some people out there that were doing like more business focused stuff, and people like you and who are some of the business of yoga mentors. I was seeing Shannon Crow do some stuff with that, and I I I started like asking myself like, okay, like what is it that I want to do with teachers? Is it teacher mentorship? Is it more business focused? And I kept seeing that like what I could really offer teachers and that I just didn't see enough of was the business side of things. And because I had had been so successful with building a private practice, and I saw so many yoga teachers struggling with making their business profitable and making it work. I decided that I was going to focus on helping other first. First, I wanted to help other teachers build a private practice, and the first thing I did was one of the first things I did was I wrote an article. And so much of these steps came from Anthony, who was the man I was living with at the time and was my partner at the time. And he said, like, write a really great article. And I was like, really? That's it? Like, write a great article? He was like, yeah, start there. And he directed me to medium.com as a great place to post my writing. And I loved writing, and I still love writing. And I've loved writing since I was a kid. And I wrote an article called, and the title is, I called it How to Get Private Yoga Clients. And I remember like hovering over the publish button with that article and looking at the title, and like my ego didn't want to publish an article with that title. I didn't think it was like a creative title. I didn't think it was a cool title. And I didn't really like the language of like how to get. It didn't feel yogic. It felt like so markety. But I was really trying to be a good marketer. I was really trying to embrace marketing. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if I really want teachers to find this article and find me, and like if I want to become their business coach and like their yoga business mentor, then I need to write an article that they're going to find. And so really where that title came from was I asked myself, like, what's the question that they're typing into a search engine that would make my article appear? Because I was thinking about SEO. And I knew it. I was like, well, they're probably wondering how to get private clients. And that's the language that they use. And I was studying marketing, and I was learning things like use the language that your target client uses. And so I published that article, and shortly after that, I created a free 5-step course. It was like a 5-day challenge kind of thing. It was called 5 Steps Towards Your Next Private Yoga Client, and I gave everyone like an action step a day that they could take toward picking up a private client. And then I started a Facebook group.
I love that. That's amazing. That's like stuff that's not complicated. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. And I also love what you're saying about what you were talking about with the Medium article, because I can also relate to like, I've called episodes like how to do this. And I'm sometimes like, am I actually teaching them how to do this? Because I don't want to like deceive, And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, yeah, I usually am. And like, this is the type of thing that people are searching for. Like, if you want to learn how to boil an egg, you're going to type into Google how to boil an egg, And the article that says like, how to boil an egg is the one that's going to show up for you. And so it makes sense to call it that. But I can also relate to the marketing side of things and not wanting to be like deceiving yoga teachers. Because of course, like that doesn't feel very yogic at all.
Right. Yeah. And I found that like if I'm going to write an article called How to Get Private Yoga Clients, then like even if I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to say yet, like I just have to commit to delivering on what the title promises. And so then like I just did write an article that really gave like everything that I knew about how to get clients. And then people can like do what they want with that information. And I think there is information in that article that does resonate with like the true essence of yoga. Because what's yoga? It's about union. It's about togetherness. It's about connection and connecting with a student for private lessons. It's absolutely yogic. It's and marketing is the same. Marketing is connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And so you created this community and this challenge. And then how did things go from there? Like, did you start getting yoga teachers that were more interested in creating a business like you had created, or what has that aspect of your business been like?
Yeah. So I wrote that article and I created the 5 days. It was called 5 days, 5 steps towards your next private yoga client. And the 5 day challenge helped me grow my list. It helped me start growing a targeted list. And and then I started a Facebook group, and I I was like, I was studying marketing, and like something I was learning, and this is now what I teach, is like, if you want to build an audience, and you want to build an audience of people who will be enthusiastic about what you do, and appreciative of your work, and like truly like following you the way, like when we're really following someone and we love their stuff, and like there's a natural progression. Like if you become aware of someone, you take advantage of their free resources for a while, then maybe you buy their book or something low cost, and like the more you develop closeness and intimacy with that person, the more likely you're going to be to invest in a deeper relationship with them, whether that's like signing up for an event or a coaching program or a mentorship. And what I was learning at the time was like, you need to give people a lot of value. You need to give people your best stuff. You need to foster relationships and connection and intimacy with your audience if you want to be able to eventually offer them something that they will gladly pay money for. And so I just started delivering as much value as I possibly could in my Facebook group. And I started going live every week. And I went live at the same time every week, Wednesdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And I would just turn on the camera and talk for 1 hour about everything I knew about growing your private students. And it started small and it grew over time. And I think like the biggest takeaway for me on this has been consistency, like consistently showing up, like just consistently showing up for your community and not giving up. And like no matter how many people are on your live session or how many people comment on your posts, like especially in the beginning when your channel is small, if you just commit to it and like consistently show up, people will develop that intimacy with you, and they will appreciate your content. And that's how I built a Facebook group, and the Facebook group is where I find all of my connections for coaching yoga teachers on business.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. And I have a lot of respect for that because going live is like definitely not my favorite thing. So the fact that you've been able to commit to it at the same time every week is really admirable. So that's really awesome. And it's cool to hear how you were able to, pivot your business and step into this place where like most of your business is online. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, since we are in this like global health crisis right now and everyone's at home, is for people who do have private yoga businesses, do you have any tips for like how to successfully teach online, or how to pivot that online, particularly right now and maybe even for the future? Like if somebody is
Yeah.
like, I love teaching privates, I hate the commute, I'd love an option when it's like, snowy and
Hmm.
below zero outside and that sort of thing.
Totally, yeah. I think what's been so interesting about all of this is like my coach, my business coach, Andrew Cruzy. He has this thing. He says pressure makes diamonds, which is like that when we're under pressure to like figure something out, we do a lot faster than and like sometimes a lot better than when there's no pressure. Like if there's a deadline or there's like necessity, and so what I've seen that's been so interesting in the past few weeks is like so many yoga teachers who have been saying for years, like, I want to do something online, I want to do more online videos, I want to do, I want to like try doing privates online. Like so many people who have been like thinking about it and toying with the idea because we have this pressure and we're all home, and like the only way to make money is to figure out online, and everyone's doing it now. So that's been super interesting. As far as tips for actually teaching, like getting private students online, teaching private students online, one thing I'll say is, like, for anyone listening who like had private students pre-coronavirus and then has not transitioned to meeting those private students online, for me, like, my assumption when all of this happened, like, I think there's so much to be said about what we assume. And I love Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements. Do you know the Four
Mhm.
Agreements?
Yeah, I do. I love that stuff as well.
Yeah, and he has, one of his agreements is don't make assumptions. And what I saw happen a lot was like assumptions. Like teachers made assumptions, like assuming that their private students would not want to meet online, assuming that nobody would want to pay for private yoga right now with the economy crashing, assuming that like yoga online won't be as valuable as yoga in person, and so it should cost less. And I've learned to assume what's helpful, assume what's supportive to me, assume what's supportive to others. And the assumption that I made when all of this happened was, I just thought to myself, well, um, my private students will want to meet online because it is not safe for us to meet in person, and it's not the best choice for anyone's health to meet in person. And so I assumed that they would be glad to meet with me online, even if I don't know how to do it perfectly yet, even if it's not as perfect as when we meet in person. I also assumed that I would figure it out with practice. And I also assumed that they would continue to pay the same rate that they always do. And the thing about that is, like, I don't think it's my responsibility to assume that someone else has been harmed financially, or assume that someone else doesn't value online privates as much as in person. I consider it their responsibility to let me know if that's the case, right? It's not my job to project these assumptions on other people's situation. So what I did was, I told my private students, all right, we're going to be meeting on Zoom moving forward, and I didn't make any mention of a change of rates. I just decided to myself, like, they can let me know and of course, if they express to me, of course, if they say, we're really hurting financially right now, can you slide during this time? I thought to myself, of course I will, if they express that, but I didn't need to bring it up. And so, let's see. As far I've been meeting with three of my private students in the evenings over Zoom, and it was awkward at first, and it's gotten better each time with practice. And do you want like actual teaching tips for teaching on Zoom?
Yeah, I think that would be awesome because I actually did a webinar on teaching online and people seem to be really curious about like the actual how we shift our teaching side of things. So, and I only teach a couple of privates online. So I'd love to hear like, from you, like what you've been doing and what you recommend.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I will say this, that the three private students who I've been working with online, all three of them are the kind of sessions I do with them. They're very gentle. They're very restorative. They're not very active. These are clients who have needs that's the way I work with them, and that's the kind of yoga we do. So even I would say this too, like, even before all of this, like the way me working with these clients looked was, I wasn't demonstrating much. I was never demonstrating much because they're people I've worked with for a while, and we do very simple, basic yoga. And in person, I was already mostly like sitting by their side and speaking the cues, and demonstrating a little bit here and there, but not doing a lot of the yoga with them. And so as I've transitioned them to online, I've said to them from the beginning, like, because we're working together online, we're going to stick to a lot of things that are already familiar to you. And you know, I'm going to we're gonna do poses that you already know pretty well, so that you can feel confident getting in and out of them without having me there with you in person. And I've been mostly sitting on the ground on yoga blankets, like with kind of like talking head style, like they can see me from the shoulders up. And sometimes I kind of like move back so they can see more of me if I am going to demo with them a little bit more. But mostly I'm speaking the cues and I'm guiding them in and out of simple poses and restorative poses that they know already. And when I want to demo and when I want to show them something, I'm working in a small space. Like I live in a small apartment. I have a roommate, so I've been teaching yoga just like in my bedroom. And so I've got to work with what I've got, and so I've been moving the computer when I want to show them something, and kind of like zooming, almost like I zoom out. I zoom out, and when I want to demo, I zoom out so that they can see first, and then I have them get into the pose. Um, and what else did I want to say about that? Yeah, I think that's like those are my main suggestions. And then I guess I'll say, like, if it is more active and you're teaching more like intricate sequencing, and and the people are not necessarily like super familiar with what you're teaching, then I would say it's probably better to do a lot more demoing and to like maybe even practice the whole class with them. And then you would need to just set up the visual for that and make sure that the computer's set up in a way that whether it's private or group, that the students can really see you and your body and what you're doing.
Absolutely. I love those tips. And I'm particularly a fan of when you were talking about not making assumptions. And I think that this is something that is really important. I'm sure you've been seeing this a lot as well. And I've been seeing it a ton over the last couple of weeks as the pandemic's really escalated, is like, a ton of people are just have gone online, and it seems like there's a ton of free stuff going around. And I'm a big proponent of like, yes, of course, there can be free aspects of our business. I mean, you have free elements of our business. My podcast is free. Facebook groups are free. There's lots of things that you can give people and you can give them value for free. But at the end of the day, there has to be a paid element too. And I think that as yoga teachers, like we really need to understand that there can still be value in what we offer, even if it is online. And I work with two yoga studios, and the one that I work most closely with was really the exact same. It was like, okay, well, now that all of our classes are online, do we lower like our auto renew membership? And the owner and then myself and the other manager had a conversation around like, okay, well, how can we make sure that it's equally as valuable for them as it was when they were coming in the studio? And at the end of the day, we just decided we're not going to, like you said, assume anything about these people's financial situations. Yet let's have a plan in place for when somebody turns around and says like, hey, I've lost my job, I have to cancel, or hey, I lost my job, are there any other options? We know what that option is, but we don't need to like just go and lower everyone's, auto
Mm-hmm.
renew memberships. We don't have to just like cut our prices in half just because we're online now, because like, a lot of our expenses have stayed the same. The rent is still the same. The studio owner wants to pay the teachers the same for their time, which is amazing. So at the end of the day, it's like the expenses don't really change and our time is still valuable. So we need to remember that when coming online. And I think it's also like it comes back to what you were saying about, pressure creates diamonds. And I know that so many teachers have stepped up to the plate right now, done things that they've been talking about doing for ages. And when you do something like that, sometimes you're just like, this is so valuable for me. Like I don't need to make any money. But, now that we're a couple weeks into this, I think it's really looking at like, okay, what we do is valuable and it is worth getting paid for.
100%. Yeah. I love that that's how you guys approached it with your studio. I think that's exactly what we need to do in moments like this. And I think as yogis, we have such big hearts, and we have so much compassion that it's easy sometimes to slip into like over serving, and yeah, we don't need to make assumptions, and instead I love that you said like, let's have a plan in place for if people do express need, like what can we offer them then. But yeah, we don't need to like jump to the conclusion. It's just assumption, and assumption's not helpful unless we choose to assume what is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that is really interesting that ended up happening is, obviously this happened super fast for all of us. And it was kind of like, schools have closed, gyms have closed. Okay, I guess we can't have people in the studio anymore. And so we had a conversation kind of like the day before about like, what is this going to look like when we can't have people in the studio? And then it was like within 24 hours, okay, we got to make this happen. And so obviously, we weren't communicating that with the students. We had to figure out like what was going to happen in order for us to take the business online. And after we got our online classes up, there's this like group of women who go to the studio. They always come to the 9:30 a.m. classes, and then they all go to coffee after. And one of them had started a thread with the others that said like, "Hey, I've decided that I'm going to keep my membership regardless because I want to practice at this studio after all this is said and done. Like, if you can afford it, I would really encourage you to do the same." And this whole thread was this group of women who were like, "Yeah, of course, like I wouldn't cancel on them," and stuff like that. And this was before like they assumed that they would just pay their normal rate and get nothing. And it was just a really beautiful thing to see. And I think it just kind of highlights, the point of what you're saying is like we can never assume what somebody values or how they value it, or, what type of relationship they have with it or how meaningful it is to them. And I think it's reminding people that like yoga is really meaningful to people, and our clients value us and our students value us. And obviously not everybody's in the financial situation to pay for something that they're not receiving, but some people are, and some people do value it enough. So I felt like it
Mm,
was like a really, like, it was such like a beautiful email chain to receive. Especially like, I mean, from like taking your business online, like it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work when you're under pressure to do it and you have no other choices. And it's just amazing to see, like, especially in a time like this, how,
mhm.
incredible humans can be.
Yeah, yeah. It's been, I've experienced a lot of the same, and something I've been sharing with teachers that I think like we need to know. Like, thank you for sharing that. That's what happened with the students in the studio, because we need to talk about those kind of stories. And for me, like two of my private students, who they're a couple, they're a married couple. They after we did our first online session, they said to me, they said, "Do you want to pick up an extra session per week? We really want to make sure that you're okay right now with everything going on." And I was like, that is so kind and that is so sweet. And personally, I was in a position where like that's I don't need that, because everything I'm doing great, and I'm not actually looking to pick up more teaching yoga at the moment. But I said to them, I was like, I don't need that like financially, but I said to them, like, if you guys need more yoga right now, if like more yoga would really support you right now, then I am all in for it. And they were like, "We're okay. We just really wanted to look out for you." And I was like, "Wow, how beautiful is this?"
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it all stems from a place of like not assuming where somebody else is at. So that's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, last question for you, Emily. I'm curious if you have any other business lessons that you've learned throughout everything you've done in your yoga career that you want to share with listeners today before we wrap up.
Oh yeah, yeah. So my favorite one, and people who work with me in my coaching programs know I say this kind of thing constantly. It's start before you're ready. And I think the person to credit for it, I know a lot of people say stuff like that, but I'll credit Marie Forleo, who's the founder of B School, a business school for women online. And I love this idea, start before you're ready, because if we wait and wait and wait until we're ready to to pursue our dreams, to become the teacher we want to be, to have the business we want to have the life we want to have, we could be waiting a very long time, and the whole opportunity might pass. So start before you're ready is my favorite gem of a teaching.
Mm-hmm. I love that one as well. I think that that's such a good lesson and a good reminder. And I think it's also too like, when are we ready to do something we've never done before, right? Like it's always going to feel uncomfortable the first time we do it. And I think that for anyone listening, if you've gone over the hurdle of teaching your first class, then you know what it's like. Like we could write every single thing out and practice 100 times, and we still don't always feel like we're ready to teach in front of other people. But once we do it, we realize what it's like. And from there, we can just continue practicing and honing. And I think that it's the exact same thing with every element of our business and every element of our life that we do. And we just kind of have to take that like leap of faith and trust that we're going to be okay.
Yeah, and to trust that if it results in some sort of mistake or mess up or imperfection, that all of that is so incredibly valuable too, and that's where so much learning happens and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today. I could seriously talk to you all day about all this stuff. I just love everything that you're doing, and I just appreciate this conversation. And if people want to learn more about you, maybe learn from you, join your private Facebook community, where can they go to find all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I would love to connect with any teachers listening who feel inspired to connect. The best place to connect with me is my free Facebook group. It's called Abundant Yogi Tribe, and its focus is private student growth as well as building your first online course. And it's just loaded up with free videos and discussion, and it's a place where you can ask questions. It's a super supportive community. So that's Abundant Yogi Tribe on Facebook. And my website is abundantyogicoach.com.
Amazing.
Abundant Yogi Coach. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll make sure that there's links for all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for the conversation today, Emily.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This was great. I love connecting with you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.